Hello, and welcome to another episode of Just Played, where I talk about tabletop RPGs I've recently participated in as either a player or a facilitator. I'm your host, Jim Crocker, and I've just played Found, which is a Cortex Prime game of shared consciousness clone conspiracy by David M.K. So when I say shared consciousness clone conspiracy, think something like Sense8 or Orphan Black, or maybe What Happened to Monday, something like that. So we play this online using Zoom with a character keeper and rollwithme.xyz. We don't have any kind of virtual tabletop for it or anything like that. It's a pretty rule-site story game, so we don't necessarily need a lot of maps or anything like that. We're doing a lot of theater of the mind type of stuff. I played this on January 30th, Sunday evening. We went for about 2.5 hours. I was a player. It was David who wrote the game who was running it for us. And we're all playing, like I said, some version of empowered sleeper agents. I'm Mackenzie Mac Rowe, a tabloid crime reporter. We've also got Elias Wrestler, who's a celebrity chef / social media influencer. And just last session, we introduced James Rayner, an experimental physicist who works at the local university at Metro University. When we started this session, we're just starting to understand the nature of our programming, and we've had a couple of brushes with shared consciousness. They've been brief and a little confusing, but as we opened this session, it was me and Elias in his manager's car driving to the university to look for James. Now that we know he exists, we just learned about him in our last session, haven't actually met face-to-face yet, though we have, kind of shared some thoughts. We've got another agent that the Foundation sent after us last session who we encountered in a morgue. He's in the back seat, drooling and incoherent because we dosed him with whatever deprogramming drug he had with him that he was supposed to use on us to get us back into the fold, but we kind of turned the tables on him. And so now we've got this unconscious, semi-comatose vegetative agent that we're not quite sure what to do with, except, just bring him along. So when we get to the university, we see that there are other Foundation goons looking for James. The Foundation is the mysterious organization, as far as we can tell, that programmed us and that we're not sure what their goals are. We're trying to get away from them, trying to keep ourselves safe from them, and they're definitely after us. So James is not there because he's in a meeting with this defense tech company who wants him to come help make weapons for them. He politely declines, but he does manage to get his hands on this experimental VR rig, which he makes off with, reasoning that because they're a big tech startup, they won't notice just one little piece of experimental gear missing. And besides, he's going to bring it back and put it back somewhere else, so they'll just think they lost it, so everything will be okay. But anyways, he gets back and he plugs this thing in and, puts it on his head and drops into this virtual space where he can see data flowing past. And he manages to use this after, kind of some experimenting to figure out how it works and how he can navigate it. He uses it to jump the gap between kind of the machine consciousness, between those streams of data to actually into making psychic contact with us, with me and Elias. So we are all kind of hooked into each other as we are dealing with these Foundation goons. Mechanically, that means we can kind of lend some dice to each other because we're, kind of hooked into each other. And we can also ask each other questions and essentially keep in contact through this psychic link, which is pretty cool. So we are involved with these goons and we see this black SUV pulling out of an alley looking for him. And I pull one of my old city kid tricks of pretending to get hit by one of their cars. I thump the hood, I fall down, I flail my arms, I yell and scream and, make a ruckus. So all the college kids come, they're all taking pictures, so they can't really do anything. They've got to leave their guns in the car as they come out to see what's going on, and I've kind of got things well in hand, I think, but Elias starts to get nervous when they start to pick me up. And they're saying, don't worry, buddy, we'll get you to a hospital. And they're starting to load me into the back of the car. So he jumps out, comes after, and a fight, of course, breaks out. And Elias ends up facing off with the guy who's the driver. We thought he was just a random NPC, but we determined that he was actually our combat instructor back when we were agents, when we were being trained. We get some flashes of memory of this. So I am, getting bundled into the back, but I managed to grab my, the guy that's loading me, and I grab his gun. Just don't even pull it out of the holster, just kind of shoot him in the leg with it. And because they're loaded with these, kind of deprogramming rounds, these like chemical rounds, he, goes slack-jawed and collapses the same way the guy we had in our back seat does. And I manage to commandeer that vehicle, just jump into the driver's seat, back it, pow, into the 2 other agents that are after us. And Elias, after, having a big hand-to-hand scrap with our teacher, uses one of my moves. Yeah, Elias is a much better fighter, but I fight dirty. So the instructor doesn't expect Elias to use one of my dirty tricks on him. And that's another part of the shared consciousness thing that's a lot of fun. So he manages to kind of give him the slip, hops into the car. We get out of there. And so we are on the lam, but we've gotten away from them again, at least for the time being, although we did leave the incapacitated agent with them, figuring they'll take care of him. He'll be okay. We don't need to be dragging him around with us. So as the game closed, we are pretty much, honestly, back where we started, which is on the road headed for James. But now we know exactly where he is. We're sure of a face-to-face meeting next session. And we've gotten a little bit more information about the Foundation and, had some of those flashback memories and stuff like that. And we actually have the names of a couple of those people who we knew from the Foundation. So we're starting to piece things together and looking forward to an actual, having the 3 of us in the same physical space with the next session. That's, kind of what we're all looking forward to. My favorite moment from one of the players in this game was when Kay, who was playing Elias, did that thing I talked about where she ID'd one of the nameless Foundation goons as our old combat instructor, who didn't want to hurt us bringing us in. He figured it wasn't our fault. Something went wrong. We got, reprogrammed early or something. And so he wanted to bring us in without hurting us. He's not interested in trying to, bust us up or bring us in dead or alive or anything like that. He very much he actually wants us to come in willingly. And it was cool because this wasn't like a planned or prompted thing. Like David didn't say, who do you know? How do you know this guy? But in setting the scene up and in figuring out how that fight worked, Kay rolled an asset for us, an advantage that we got in the scene, and then just asked if that'd make sense as a way to turn that die, that kind of abstract helping die we had, into something specific with some narrative weight. She said, hey, how about if he's an instructor and he doesn't want to hurt us, and that's why we have an advantage in the fight? And it was fantastic. It was perfect in the moment. And it was also definitely a great example of why Cortex works so well for these sorts of games. That's kind of thing that we're playing right now. And I'm going to talk about that when I talk about something I noticed from the game for this particular session. So my favorite moment from the GM or facilitator, I wasn't running this game, so I don't get to have a favorite moment of what I did as GM, but David did a great job. He's bringing us along really nicely. But in this particular session, his description of that virtual psychic landscape that James accessed was super cool and a little out of left field, given how much we'd focused on the hard-boiled Jason Bourne spycraft stuff for the first 3 episodes. It was neat. It felt very much like what a TV show would do, ramping up the sci-fi elements only after we've established the characters. We've kind of met this new character in, what for us would have been episode 3 of the show. But in episode 4, they start bringing some of the special effects and we get the flowing data streams and all this kind of stuff that, then kind of hook into our consciousness and we can sort of flash back and forth to each other. It was neat because he had some good visual metaphors for how our shared consciousness works. It gave us, a way to kind of picture it in a way that had been a little bit abstract before, and we kind of got more of a sense of how that worked in this session. And it was really cool. That said, that shared consciousness thing is still pretty spotty. It doesn't work all the time. It's kind of unreliable and can kind of hit us when we're not expecting it. But that's how it should be. And I really like that it's, we're still learning about it as we go. It's not just like a power we can call on whenever we want. And it really is helping with the atmosphere and the genre to kind of nail down the genre of how a show like this should go. So a thing I noticed about the game itself, about the rules, Cortex has a bit of a learning curve when you are first introduced to how it puts dice pools together. In a nutshell, for anyone that hasn't played it, you roll a handful of polyhedrals and you take the 2 highest, which are basically what in a game like D&D would be your to-hit number. If you have that's your kind of target number that you're rolling. But your effect, which is to say the intensity of your outcome, what in D&D would be a damage roll or something like that, is measured by just a die type, just how big one of your remaining dice is. So let's say a roll and found might have 3 8-siders, 1 10-sider, and 1 4-sider put together from your stats. Like because I'm a awakened sleeper agent, I get a D8. Because this is a physical altercation, I get another D8 where I would get 6 if it were social and 10 if it were, kind of a mental challenge. And then I get a die for a relationship in the scene. Is it, the person that I'm working with? Is it someone that's advising me? We can kind of default to our relationships with each other whenever that shared consciousness link is activated, which is kind of cool. And like I said, if we've got a shared consciousness thing going on and someone can plausibly say, here's a skill I know or that I'm lending on you can take another die for that. So you put your little pool of dice together, you roll them all, and you take 2 die, you add 2 dice together for that result, and then you take a third die and you use the number of sides on it to determine the intensity of your effect. So let's say you roll that pool in found, your result might be something like 13 with a D8 effect. When you're new to it, learning to read those dice in 2 different ways on the fly can be challenging because sometimes you don't necessarily want to always take the highest die type. Because if I'm rolling a single D12 and I roll an 11 on it, but my other dice are lower, I may want to take that D12 and just have a D8 effect, but get a higher target number. That's the kind of strategy that goes into reading it and the kind of thing that is a little bit tough to figure out when you're first getting started. That can be challenging. But right now in session 4, we've hit the point in the game where we're all comfortable enough that it's flowing smoothly. So we can experience where Cortex really shines, which is in that sweet spot between mechanically robust but complex big book games like D&D or Hero System and purely narrative story games, stuff that is diceless or GM-less, belonging outside belonging games, something like that. Being able to just assign dice to bits of the story as we need to measure their narrative weight is exactly where I want to be with this game. It is the perfect system for this sort of genre where so much of the play is emergent, generated by flashbacks and questions and unexpected reveals of things we didn't know we knew. Being able to collaborate in designing all of that on the fly is really satisfying, and I'm really looking forward to more sessions of this. So that's it for this week. To recap, I just played Found, which is a Cortex playset that is still in beta test that I'm helping playtest, and we're having a lot of fun with it. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Likes Games, just like it sounds, which is also the name of the YouTube channel that I host. You can look for me at conventions, working with my friends at Indie Press Revolution, and listen for me on other shows in the Curmudgeons and Dragons family of gaming podcasts, who I am so thrilled that they are helping me put Just Played back out on the air. This episode was written by me, Jim Crocker, and is produced by Jason Portizo. That's it for this week, so if you'll excuse me, I'm going to play another game.
Thank you for listening to Curmudgeons and Dragons. Please share this with your favorite adventurers. Leave a review on Apple and follow us on social media. All links can be found at curmudgeonsanddragons.com. Practice safe adventuring, my friends.